Welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, and today we're doing the Cosmic Connections Relationship Astrology, and I have Robert, Simon, and Justin joining me. Welcome, team. It's good to see you all.
Hello, good to see you.
Hey,
So we're starting a new project. I love it. I love it. So um, to get a hold of Madam Simon, her website is iconalchemy.com. My website is alightpath.com. Justin's website is justincrockettelzie.com. And Robert's website is deepearthastrology.com. And we always enjoy hearing from you, and we look forward to it. And Robert's going to start us off with a little bit of background about the couple that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I mean, today we decided to start off with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. This is a couple that's really been in the news a lot lately because of an ongoing legal issue that is happening with Blake Lively. That they met actually in 2010. They're both actors. They met on the set of The Green Lantern. They were married in 2012. I believe they have 4 kids with maybe one on the way. There's a little bit of questioning, but they had their first child in 2014. Um, and they live in New York, so they're one of those acting couples that doesn't live on the West Coast. They live on the East Coast. And like I said, there was an incident on one of Blake Lively's movies with another actor by the name of Justin Baldoni, where she was accusing him of sexual harassment, inappropriate behavior. He came back with some credible comments that she wasn't exactly a sunflower in the situation either. And so that's kind of been ongoing, causing a little bit of stress. And they are very much a power couple, I would say, in Hollywood. They are now the co-chairs of the Met Gala. There's a lot of business ownerships between them. I mean, Ryan has, a soccer team. He has a vodka company. He does Mint Mobile. He's very, engaged with the business community. And she is also involved with that. She's a very smart cookie, and I think we're going to see that in the charts.
Thank you, Robert.
awesome.
So, Justin, you can tell us the quote, please.
Yeah, so I thought of a great quote and about relationships, and you can never go wrong with Edgar Casey. I figured it was a safe quote to go with. So this was actually he wrote a lot about soulmates. And so this is a quote where he said, "We are attracted to another person at a soul level, not because that person is our unique complement, but because by being with that individual, we are somehow provided with an impediment to become whole ourselves." And I thought that kind of encompassed the whole aspect, whether you're a partner, friend, whatever that relationship is. I thought this was a good quote by Edgar Casey.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, thanks. So, who wants to start with the houses in relationship and go over it kind of quick? Robert?
Yeah, I mean, the first one is the relationship with the self. I mean, that's really the key. You can't really escape the word self when you're talking about the first house. The second is that the family as a unit, but also the family's possessions. What they own. The third tends to be more of the sibling relationships, short travel. The fourth is the parents and the family lineage, but it can also be the home itself that you own and how you kind of caretake that home life. Fifth tends to be children and romance. You see sexuality there as well. Also fun. I mean, how a couple enjoys fun is often seen in the fifth house. The sixth house is day-to-day life. It's coworkers, it's employees. It can also be, you can see health things sometimes in the sixth house with relationships, and especially if we have like, a Neptune there. Seventh is the relationship. It's that love, that close bond that we have between two people who are extraordinarily close. And then eighth is the shared resources with the partners. That's, eighth is, death, sex, and taxes. It's often the things, the taboo things that we don't usually like air our dirty laundry out for. The ninth is the grandparents, the role models. Could also be the relationship that the couple has with religion or education at a higher level. 11th is the friends, the extended family, how we relate to the community. And the 12th is, the hidden things. And, the 12th house is, I've yet to find a good definition of everything that encompasses the 12th house. So if one of you fellow astrologers could enlighten me, that'd be great. But it really encompasses things like the collective unconscious. It's the things that we don't know that we don't know. So yeah, it's very, very, very powerful there in relationships as well.
Thank you, Robert. And Simon, can you tell us about the asteroids and centaurs?
I will, but before I do that, I want to say what my favorite statement about the 12th house is, which is that it is the place where we have to deal with things unaided and alone.
Yes.
So, and even in the most committed relationship, you need time alone. So
exactly.
Okay, so with our asteroids, centaurs, etc., we've got Juno. Juno is typically seen as relating to partnerships and commitments, but I very much look at it as it's not just, is there a romantic partnership or what have you? It's how committed are you to an institution like your marriage, if you're married. How committed are you to that? And what kinds of things, what kinds of agreements do you have that are going to maintain that? Even when maybe it would otherwise be in rocky territory. Okay. So, oaths, promises are here with Juno. It's kind of like the social glue of the relationship, the front that you put on. Pallas Athena is our strategic thinking, our wisdom, our planning. Ceres relates to what is nurturing or nourishing, but can also be a hunger, and definitely has that side that is related to the Demeter, Persephone, Pluto myth that can relate to grief. Vesta is, goddess of hearth and home, but is also our sacred spark, or what we hold sacred, where our focus is, what is important to us. So I love looking at Vesta in relationships for that reason. Eros is love, and typically sexual or erotic love is here. Eros is just one form of love in Greek. We have eros, we have agape, we have filial love, like brotherly love. So there's different types of love, but eros, the asteroid, certainly relates to sexual love and also to that vitality, that kind of oomph, okay, in life. Nessus, is one of the centaurs and relates to trauma and abuse. Pholus is another one of the centaurs, can be a sudden turning point in a relationship, can also be our hidden talents. Psyche is one of the asteroids. We see her as the soul bond between people, but also how does the soul know itself through the experience of love? Aia is one of the goddess asteroids who relates to our health, and in particular, what are the conditions that make health possible? If if we're living in unhealthy conditions, that's going to be reflected in a natal IEA or in an IEA transit. Whereas if we're cultivating healthful conditions, then that will also be reflected in her. Chiron is another one of the centaurs, the wounded healer archetype, the wise teacher, the teacher to heroes. Okay, the teacher to Heracles. The vertex, so you have it here as auspicious connections, and I can kind of see that. Same with, the anti-vertex as being challenging connections. But I look at either the vertex or the anti-vertex as being a twist of fate. Okay. The part of fortune also has that kind of twist of fate aspect to it, the element of chance. Fortune here is neither fortuna buona or fortuna mala, neither good nor bad, just fortune. Okay, just that chance. And finally, Lilith. We're using the natural Lilith here, and it's hard to sum her up in just a short phrase, but I would say that she is what is untamed and what is challenging to social mores. It's not simply that she's authentic. It's not simply that she's wild. It's that she's wild in a way that is a little uncomfortable for people.
Thank you, Simon. And Justin, can you go over the planets and relationships, please?
Yeah, and can I say one thing about the asteroid centaurs? I'm not sure if we can.
Sure.
Sure. Just a couple of things about those that I think is really interesting. If we look at Greek mythology, Eros and Psyche were in a relationship together. So that's something to think about. I think that if somebody's watching the show today, that'll be something that we'll look at, is the relationship between Eros and Psyche in the chart. Since Greek mythology, they were a couple. And then also the part of fortune, I wanted to say, Dane Rudyard looked at that as also what makes a person happy. What is that soul trying to accomplish as far as fortune in life and what makes them happy. So I just wanted to put those two things in there.
I think that makes sense as well, because if you look at the part of fortune, it is a derived point based on the ascendant, the sun and the moon. So it is essentially that fourth part that completes the solidity. So you often see in relationships, I find that the part of fortune is where, you're getting the most synthesized version of yourself and how it relates to your partner. So that's just something I've noticed as well.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
And so the planets in a relationship chart, of course, the sun represents our self, the individual self, or how a person sees himself. The moon is our emotional nature, what we look for as far as how we express our emotions or how we view emotions, handle our emotions. Mercury, as we look in the charts, will be how the person communicates. Very interesting to look at their two Mercuries, and we'll see that today with these couple. There's something very unique with their Mercuries. Venus, how they express desire and affection, and so this is also very important to look at the aspects, if they aspect between the two Venuses. Mars is how the person or how we want to take action, and along with those asteroids and centaurs and also the planets, I think it's important to pay attention to what sign they're in, because that'll show what a person looks for in a relationship or how a person wants to take action. And so not only do we look at the aspects, also the sign. Jupiter represents growth and expansion in the person's chart. Saturn represents karma, discipline, hard work, how the soul seeks to establish itself. Uranus, the planet rebellion, revolution, and change, is quite simple there. Represents also how a person's unique. And so that'll be, and also can represent risk and how a person takes risk in a chart. So we'll look at that. Neptune represents how we relate to the collective. And you know, in a lot of people's charts, this is retrograding. So it's, you know, if it's retrograding, it can be where a person's striving to accomplish something in the collective, and we may see in the couples where one has it easy in the collective and the other one doesn't, and then how they support each other with their role in the collective. And then, of course, Pluto, the beautiful planet of regeneration, transformation, death, and rebirth. This can also represent between the couples those situations that are outside their control, that comes in and really brings in big events for relationship. And so these are some of the things that we'll take a look at today.
Good, thank you. So we're going to start with Blake's natal chart, and it has a Rodham rating of AA, so that's a good rating. That it should be an accurate time, August 25th, 1987 at 5:07 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And who wants to start? Simon?
Well,
I'm just noting that Saturn ruled descendant. So that is, so the descendant, of course, is what we're looking for in another, in the sense of that point represents for us partner, other, okay? And with a Saturn ruled descendant, what is going to be attractive as far as a partnership is concerned for Blake is something that has a measure of stability and permanence, something serious.
and that really just plays off of what's going on in the first house. I mean, we're talking about a super Virgo here, you know, especially with the conjunction between the Sun and the Mars. You know, when you're doing just a natal reading, if you have a lot of planets in the first house, you're going to be talking about that for a little while. You know, this is the house of the self. What are some words that we would use to describe Virgo energy, guys?
Well, I got to say something really quickly about that for 1 degree of Virgo. So in the Sabian symbols, the 1st degree of Virgo is about this extreme objectivity. So, and that Sun and Mars is very ambitious. In the Jyotish chart, the lunar mansion for this, or nakshatra, is Aslation, the second pot of which is ambitious. And so she is very smart, extremely objective, like really rational, logical. You were asking about keywords for Virgo. I mean, she's also got a Virgo moon, so she's very logical, rational, very smart. She's in her head a lot. She's got Mercury there. She's, you know, very smart, very intelligent, and very clearly defines what her action is, and sees it clearly. She knows what she wants, basically, with that 1 degree Virgo.
Precision is the word I would use.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because she has all of this going on in the first house, and it's all within that Virgo sign. When you look at the vibrational astrology and what harmonic charts are the most powerful for her, it's one. It's the natal chart. This is a self of self person. You know, very focused on that. And you know, you do have the Leo ascendant there. You know, the Leo ascendant is it's Leos are always on a path of self-actualization. You know, that's really where Leo derives their primal energy from. And the ascendant is our very reactive self. It's our core self. It's not like the sun where we're constantly evolving and developing it. It's very much to do with our personality. So I think that's a really good combination for an actress, though, is having that Leo ascendant out there, that is not so scared to be out in the spotlight with all of that, you know, very accurate, as you said, precise Virgo energy. And if you know, Liz, what do you think about those trines to Jupiter and Neptune? I mean, I feel like they might loosen her up a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I like that. And doesn't it go to Uranus too? Looks like it, yes. Well,
Yeah.
loosely. That'd be pretty wide.
Yeah.
Too wide. Yes. Absolutely.
You know,
And I like all that energy in that first house. It's like a pretty dynamic person for sure.
Yeah, you know, there is something psychologically. So diving into her psyche here, psychology is that she's got that high G in Leo. And in my experience, and it's in the 12th house, which we were all talking about earlier about that 12th house, you know, something you got to work on, you have to work with. She has high G there in Leo, and this is the hygiene of creative self-expression. And in my experience, when a person has high G in Leo, they're going to hide something about themselves that they don't want other people to know. And Virgo energy can be very sensitive to criticalness, even though they're you know, also very critical and discerning, but they don't like it as well. And I feel like there's something here that she is actually working on creative self-expression here. And of course we see the Chiron and Gemini there, so that's a little bit of that. But she is learning to be a little bit more vulnerable, that with that high G and Leo, and to be authentic and not try to look for perfection, you know, as the Virgo would want to.
Right.
So I do think that we would be remiss at, you know, talking about all this Virgo-ness if we ignored the ruler of Virgo, that Mercury domiciled in Virgo and part of a grand Earth trine with Neptune in Capricorn and the midheaven in Taurus. And note also that Mercury is conjoining Nessus, relating to trauma and abuse. And what is this role that she got in and then wound up with legal issues because of? You know, it is this movie, It Ends With Us, speaking about domestic abuse, and then experiencing legal issues as a result of that. I find that a little too on the nose.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and
anything else?
Yeah, I would say about Nessus and abuse, in my experience, it can also reflect what you get from others. It can be it can be either or, how you assert or how somebody else happens. And so this can mean that she could have people that are very critical of her with Nessus and Virgo, and really attack her. And of course that triggers that Hygiene Leo to about worrying about how other people see her, you know. But I mean, she's really smart. I'm just curious what you all think about that Pluto on the IC.
I mean, I looked at that. I agree 100% that could be kind of an intense home life is really where I was going with that, especially. And we'll get into Ryan's chart later, but I think he is kind of the antidote to that Pluto in on the IC in a lot of ways, when we look at his chart, just because he brings so much of that kind of intense home energy as well. But yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to have a Pluto and Scorpio on the IC. I mean, it's certainly going to bring a lot of intense energy to the home life and to how, where we came from. There was not a lot of information about what her early life was, but I can't imagine her being somebody who wasn't empowered especially with that Jupiter in Aries and that Saturn in Sagittarius. I mean, while it is retrograde, that Jupiter in Aries is very fearless in finding meaning in their life. That's not somebody who is not going to go out and find what they want. They're going to go out there and pursue things to, when an Aries Jupiter expands, there's no question as to how they're going to do it. And the Sagittarius and Saturn is kind of an oxymoron within itself. It's restriction versus freedom, and that is definitely I see as somebody who has a lot of self-control while still having the passion there, and it can only be helped by all of that Virgo in the first house is having a little bit of self-control.
Well, and that Jupiter rules that Saturn too, because it's in Sagittarius. So it gives it another emphasis of the Jupiter energy.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know what also jumped out to me, a couple of things, was the Juno, which represents marriage, relationship, and she's got it in that Aquarius. I tend to find that people with Juno and Aquarius they like unusual people. But that's an individualistic sign. So there's something, and because her nodes are Aries Libra, which by the way, she just finished an 18-year cycle in her life with the nodal return and changes of and going through a lot of the relationship stuff at work. I do feel there's this a lot of because she has Juno and Aquarius, there will be things how she's working with herself versus relationship, and her individuality separate from relationships. There's an awareness, I think, there of her own individuality and separateness within a relationship that she's working with there with the Juno and Aquarius.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the other thing, the final thing I would like to just touch on is just, look at that vertex and Uranus. I mean, it's a little wide, but I mean, especially in the fifth house, I don't necessarily, bit of a wild card, I would say, when we're doing things with Blake. I could see this person being a very good intimate partner, but not necessarily somebody who's always fun to work with. And that is kind of the narrative that is coming out when we're talking about this current legal spat that she's going through.
And note the Chiron at the anti-vertex that is opposing that Uranus.
Yeah.
And it's Chiron out in public in the 11th house, and in Gemini, relating to how do we communicate, and in particular, what are those kind of one-on-one interactions within the larger group?
Yeah.
And as Justin said, she's obviously very smart. I mean, we have the astrological evidence, but we also have the empirical evidence. And a Chiron in Gemini is very much somebody who questions their intelligence and their ability to communicate sometimes. And in the anti-vertex, that is an extraordinarily sensitive point for this person. In the 11th house, now we're opening it up to friend circles in the community. I mean, that is a very important point in her chart.
I think she's a unique person, and I think with the Chiron and Gemini, she's going to have some challenges with people really getting her or understanding where she's coming from. I think that could play out in that way.
And she's still relatively young. I mean, she's not even 40 yet. It will be interesting to see how she heals that wound and gives voice to others.
Note also that she has Lilith is square that Jupiter, and that Lilith is in the 12th house. And so I feel very much like that it backs up some of what Justin was saying earlier about not wanting to reveal certain things, not wanting to be seen in certain ways. And yet at the same time, going back to that Mercury-Nessus combination, it's in a minor grand trine with that Pluto and that Neptune. And so there is this need to reveal hidden things and a need to speak about one's trauma or abuse. And at the same time, there's, what am I keeping close to the chest? What am I holding back? And what am I going to have to put out there? And there's kind of a balancing act going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to piggyback off of something you two said about Uranus. And I've seen this a lot in a lot of people's charts lately, is that Uranus opposition to Chiron. And it's an indicator of how the Chiron has to heal itself. It has to lean into the Uranus. And also the other unique thing, so there's got to be some change she has to do in order to heal that Chiron, with Uranus trying to pull on it to get it to heal. But people I found that have Uranus in Sagittarius, actually, and because that also shows how you're good or what you have some really good creative abilities with, is Uranus in Sagittarius makes good philosophers, good good poetry, good poet, or people are good with lyrics or poetry or philosophy. So I thought that was interesting how that was next to the vertex point that you all pointed out.
Yeah. Cool chart.
Absolutely. Anything else anybody wants to make a comment on this chart, or we're ready to move on to Ryan's?
Yeah, let's keep it moving.
Okay. So here's Ryan's chart. His is a C rated. Born October 23rd, 1976 at 4:30 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time in Vancouver, Canada. So who wants to start with this one? Robert?
Yeah, I mean, just like we had a lot of Virgo last time, now we have a lot of Scorpio. I mean, we're talking about, you know, we have the sun, the north node, and the moon in conjunction. You know, this is somebody who, you know, I would say that there's a fair amount of authenticity to who they are, but at the same time, you know, that is always going to be kind of always reaching for more. You know, that synthesis between the sun, the moon, and the north node, and you know, it is that, you know, there is a sextile relationship between Virgo and Scorpio, and you know, that is going to bring a fair amount of cooperation between these two. You know, especially in their suns. Now we were talking about a 1 degree Virgo sun with Blake, and now we're talking about a 0 degree Scorpio with Ryan. They're both kind of the, you know, the baby of their sun sides, and I have that 0 degree Leo sun, so I understand how that is. How that really functions is that you know, they both are going to, you know, really, by the time they reach 30 degrees in their progress chart over the first 30 years of their life, they're really going to have a good idea of how to be a Virgo and a Scorpio. So, you know, those two energies, I think, are going to be very mature energies between them, especially at this point in their lives. And, you know, it's just very interesting with him in the Scorpio energy, especially in the second house. What do you guys think about Scorpio in the second house? How would you translate that?
Well, I have Scorpio in the second house natally.
Great.
So, you know, Scorpio can, well, it certainly can be known for the scorpionic sting. It can also play things close to the chest. It can also be maybe a bit furtive and hidden about what it possesses.
Mm-hmm.
It should also be noted that sometimes when we are looking at certain signs in the second house, especially fixed signs, there can be a sense of partner as possession.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so it's going to be interesting to look at the two charts together to see if there are any things that hit that or stir up that energy a bit more. There's also the sense that different people have there's different schools of thought on how to treat the second house when it comes to not simply material possessions but one's values.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
But I do think that when one has Scorpio in the second house, then part of one's life journey is going to involve the transformation of one's values, the deepening of one's values. And how does one's emotional experience inform one's values? And when you have relationships that perhaps stir up one's passions, they in turn are going to promote some very deep transformation for that Scorpio in the second house individual.
Yeah.
So.
It's also interesting that the Pluto is in the first house. In Libra, I would say that as somebody who is using their charm to achieve their second house goals. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah.
And that this is a very...
Yeah.
Well, I might point out one thing. Remember, we don't know if this is the correct time, but I do think there is a point to the whole aspect of resources in his life. In his Vedic chart, um, there's a key word that comes to a lot, and it's called stability. And of course, when a person has their nodes between Scorpio and Taurus, Taurus is about accumulation and materialism and one's Maslow hierarchy needs, and Scorpio is about death, and loss and the spiritual. And so, and as Simon pointed out, fixed signs. And he's got that Chiron on that comes in from a past life on, conjunct his south node. That's critical. And so there is something about how he's striving for stability in life, which is a little bit hard, of course, because the moon conjunct Uranus there. So I think, and also I think this is probably kind of close to his birth time, because he is usually when the sun is in the second house, this person should work for themselves. So I could see, as you brought up earlier, Robert, how he's got his hands in all these businesses. I think there is this striving for stability and life with his resources, and I think that's the way I see that.
Yeah. Well, he's very known also. The other thing I just wanted to point out is that Saturn in Leo, he is very known for being extraordinarily sensitive. It's as far as his projects and being on the set, and Saturn in Leo does not like their vision of self-actualization being questioned. They're very serious about it, and they will snap back on that. And there are numerous articles about this, like we see him expressing that Pluto Libra in the first house being the charmer to get what they want, but as soon as push comes to shove and he's actually being questioned, we see that Saturn in Leo come out that is very sensitive about their self-actualization.
Well, and that makes sense with the Chiron in Aries,
Mm-hmm.
on the South Node, the issue of being valued. Actually, I saw this interesting IMDb little clip he did with the guy that played Wolverine, and of course there was this play on when he didn't have all the accolades that. I can't remember the actor's name that played Wolverine. There was sort of like, oh, woe is me a little bit, And so, yeah, there is that issue. Plus, he's got high G and Virgo in the 12th house. Again, back to the 12th house, as Simon mentioned before, a thing we got to deal with. He's got this wound of high G of being criticized, and within Virgo there. I might also say back to your point on the 0 degree Scorpio in the Sabian symbols. The 0 degree Scorpio is the person that is like goes beyond. I mean, it's like this open-mindedness and just has a extreme passion. So whereas she has extreme objectivity, he can have extreme passion and taking risk in certain ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, risk is a really good word, because on his vibrational chart, he is his strongest harmonic chart is vibration 46, which is 23 times 2. 23 is all about striking out into the world fearlessly, not knowing what is going to be happening and trusting your instincts and going forward, and you see that in his work. I mean, the whole Deadpool thing that he brought to life, that was a train wreck from the beginning, that he kind of, alchemized very scorpionically into a very powerful movie. That you're talking about him and Wolverine, Hugh Jackman, that Deadpool movie that just came out, it was the highest rated R movie that has ever come out. The only reason that happened is because of his investment into that. He went out and did that again with a soccer team with one of his friends, one of the actors from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He bought a soccer team over in the UK and rehabilitated that and transformed that from a nothing team to a Mint Mobile. It was a very small cell phone company. He got involved. Now you see the commercials all over the place. It's a big provider now. So this is somebody, what are we talking about things? These are all money-making ventures. So, this is really expressing what Simon was talking about as far as how that relationship works with that second house Scorpio energy.
Yeah. And I would say I think there's one key word for both of them, Blake and him, is ambition. I think they're
Mhm.
both ambitious. Very,
And the
that's
most
what.
important thing about the 46 is it's 23 times 2. This person wants to do things in partnerships. I think that some of that sensitivity that we talked about through what you were discussing with the Chiron and the Saturn in Leo, like he really relies on close partnerships to even keel him out. Maybe not be the best person for doing things on a solo basis, but when he's working closely with somebody else, whether that be in a relation, the seventh house can be partnerships, business relationships, our love interests, long-term relationships. But he is somebody who definitely relies on that. What would you talked about the descendant with Blake's chart, Simon. What would you say about the descendant for Ryan?
So the descendant for Ryan is a Pisces descendant. Now, if we're going with the traditional rulership, that would be Jupiter. If we're going with modern or transcendental rulership, that would be Neptune. And note that Jupiter and Neptune are in opposite houses here, but Neptune is being received by Jupiter in Sagittarius. If we want to go with Jupiter as traditional ruler, then we've got Jupiter is in Taurus in mutual reception with Venus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now it's interesting because it's kind of a wonky mutual reception. I prefer mutual receptions with an actual tight aspect between them.
Yeah.
And this one is a bit more towards a quincunx. But by sign, it is still a mutual reception. And, looking at that Jupiter, it's at that anaretic 29th degree. It's completing a cycle. It's finishing up something. And so I am inclined to see then this descendant as being concerned with, kind of that Piscean, merging, you complete me kind of attitude. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There are some other things I think are notable in this chart that, based on some of the things you guys were talking about, that I do want to touch on. So that Neptune that we see there in that third house is part of a minor grand trine with the Pallas Saturn conjunction in Leo in the 11th house, and that Pluto in Libra that you keep mentioning, Robert. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And when we see Saturn trine Neptune, there is this ability to make dreams real. Note for both of these people that Neptune is pretty prominent in the chart, that Neptune is within a trine in their charts. And Neptune is, of course, associated with the cinema. Okay. And you were talking about the business end of things and these projects, these practical projects and concerns of Ryan Reynolds. That very much to me is a reflection of that Saturn trine Neptune with the charm of that Pluto in Libra. And again, note that Pluto in Libra is ruled by Venus, okay, who is in that interaction there that I mentioned with Jupiter, the ruler of the descendant. And so I feel like that's going to have a bigger role. That Pluto is going to have a bigger role in this relationship than might otherwise be the case. Note also that we have multiple placements at 12 degrees in this chart. We have Ceres at 12 degrees in the 12th house, squaring that Neptune. And that Ceres is conjoining Eros. And so there is a hunger for love, but it is in an isolated place. Okay. and it is forming a T-square with that Neptune and Pholus on the other side. And when we're looking at Ceres and the kind of hunger that Ceres can relate to, typically the ability to satisfy that hunger is in the opposite house. And here we have right opposite that Ceres is that answer, a hidden talent, ruled again by that Jupiter who governs the 12th, the descendant, not the 12th. So I feel like there's going to be these interesting areas that go back to the relationship where we're not going to necessarily see it obviously until we start pulling those threads and seeing where those connections are that relate to that descendant.
Makes a lot of sense. And, you know, just for the listeners, like, you know, when we're talking about Pluto in Libra, I mean, we're not talking about a Venus in Libra. We're not talking about somebody who is subtly gracious and somebody who is very good at mending fences between two parties. This is offensive charm. This is over the top charm. This is intense charm. And if you look at his body of work, that really is interwoven in everything he did. Like, Deadpool is this, you know, over the top even for superhero standards, in terms, but also very endearing and very charming. You know, the characters that he played in Waiting and his first big breakout movie, they were these over the top, sarcastic but lovable, charming, you know, good looking guy, you know. So it's like when we're talking about Pluto in Libra in the first house, I mean, we're talking about an intensity of the self, an intensity of the personality. That's
Yeah.
really where I was thinking.
And you know, I just want to say one thing about give you people a different perspective here, or another perspective of Pluto, because Pluto is the planet of death and rebirth. And when it's, you know, for the generation that it's in Libra, they're learning about non-attachment with relationship. They're learning about the death of relationship, that there's no such thing as permanence in social bonds. And this is actually a little bit harder for him. And he definitely, I agree, intense personality. If you've ever seen the commercials, he's like right there. He's intense. You know, he's got that Scorpio moon and that 0 degree sun. This person's intense. And at the same time, he wants to get along with the others. Like you're like, you know, to Simon's point, the relationship. He's got the Juno right next to Libra. I mean, to Mercury and Libra. So there's he strives for harmony, getting along. He's not a fighter. He wants to get along with others. And so Mercury and Libra is trying to find, you know, can be a little indecisive. It's always trying to make the right decision, but because it's next to Juno in Libra, he strives for equanimity or balance in relationship and wanting to get along with others. But there's an intensity here that plays out. He's not going to get along with everybody. Of course, part of that is because that Juno and Mercury is opposite the Chiron. So he wants people to like him. He wants to get along with others. But he's going to have to learn with Pluto there that, you know, he's not going to get along with everybody.
Yeah.
And that Mercury Juno combination opposite Chiron is forming a T-square with Vesta. Vesta in Cancer. Okay, right out there in the 10th house. And, you know, Vesta relates to where is our focus in particular. And in Cancer, you know, one of the things about Cancer in kind of a public space is this ability to seem friendly even when one is being pointed. You know, there is the ability to tap into sensitivities. And when we're talking about going back to that Pluto in Libra, you know, Pluto in Libra being a generational placement, as you said, and in the tight sextile with Neptune. Pluto and Neptune have been doing this kind of sextile dance, in and out of orb, but for quite some time, for the past several decades. But here it is a very tight sextile. And so when we're looking at things that are tapping into that Plutonian energy and that Neptunian energy for him, it's very much tapping into the zeitgeist.
Mhm.
It's what is he able to communicate to the general population, to his generation, through his films and through his work.
That's very accurate and a very good point.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I want to piggyback off. I think you're onto something about the Cancer. As you pointed out, that square with Vesta, of course, again, that the emotions within relationships. And of course, I would say with the Cancer in the 10th house, he likes to be a part of a family, quote unquote, when it comes to his career. But he's got that Nessus there. We talked about Nessus with her and Virgo, where people can be critical of her. Well, Nessus in Cancer, there can be some things that happen in career where he can be, people try to emotionally manipulate him, or there can be this wound and trauma with, again, not everybody is not going to always feel like a family where he's a part of it with his career.
And
And
to back
all
that
of
up,
his Scorpio stuff.
yeah. And to
Yeah.
back up what you just said with some actual, some information, when we're talking about that Deadpool franchise, he first did it when it was still under the Sony situation, and they pretty much made him perform a very bastardized form of the character. So he had a really awful relationship with them because they feel like this was his caretaking role. Let's talk about Cancer. That that he was fighting with about the studios. So that was the impetus of him going forward and restarting this franchise. And I think with the Vesta there too, I mean, a focus on caretaking, that works really well with all of his efforts as far as his businesses. Like, he is outwardly invested in caring about these businesses. He's not somebody that's just throwing money at it and then walking away. He's doing the commercials, he's lead starring, he's doing the advertising. This is somebody that is nesting, all right, all of his things,
Yeah.
Well, and that shows with his new moon, because he's born with a new moon, and so is Blake, and it's in that second house. So they try a lot of things and they're not afraid to go for it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's that's only brought to even greater effect when we're talking about a sextile relationship between a Virgo and a Scorpio. All right. I think
Exactly.
we're good on this chart.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we'll go into the Synastry, and we have Blake in the center and Ryan on the outer wheel. So who wants to start?
I'd
Justin?
love to start with one thing that jumped out with me, and I'd be curious what you two think, or the three of you think. So what's interesting about here is that they both their Mercuries are sextiles, the other's Uranus. And I think this is auspicious in a way. This, to me, they'll always have something to talk about. So I think this is an auspicious thing in a relationship, because they actually find each other constantly unique, innovative, and always something new to talk about. But also at the same time, they can inspire each other with Mercury. Each of their Mercury sextiles the other's Uranus, and I'm just curious what you also think about that.
They won't run out of things to talk about, that's for sure.
No.
And they could be good sparring partners too. So
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it makes a ton of sense. And listen, just from, we're talking about a lot of asteroids and a lot of complicated aspect patterns here, but really at the end of the day, when you have somebody, a relationship where one person shares the ascendant with the other person's sun, that is a 101 good start to a relationship. Like, the direction of one person's life is being supported by the most natural version of the other, and I think that can't be underrated in a relationship. I mean, I look at the close friendships that I have that Scorpio rising, and listen, I love a Scorpio, like I always have, I feel like, I can talk to them. You're when you have that aspect between two people, there's an ability to let your guard down at a level that is, that is not always natural. And it becomes natural when that happens. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think that when one partner's sun is on another partner's angle, there is definitely a potent connection. The only caution I would say to that is that sometimes it can feel for the partner whose angle is being lit up by that sun, that they may be in the shadow of that other person's sun,
Yeah.
that other person is seen more than them. So that's that's always kind of the case that I've seen with regard to anytime something significant is on another partner's angles. It's going to impact, especially when it comes to the midheaven or the ascendant, that it's going to impact how visible that other person feels.
Even more so amplified in Virgo, which by itself is somebody that can sometimes feel underappreciated.
Right. One of the things that I'm very that just immediately leaps out for me here is that I talked about the rulers of the descendants, and here we see the ruler of Blake's descendant conjoins the transcendental ruler of Ryan's descendant. So that right there, that's something I love to see in Synastry. I want to see a relationship between the rulers of the descendants, and I prefer for it to be, not a square or an opposition. So when I see a nice tight conjunction like that between them, I'm like, oh, they are aligned. They are going in the same direction.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm going to bring in a challenge here that I think is for them is that their Venuses are squared. So, even though they've got that Mercury Uranus sextile, which is a lot of conversation, always keeping each other engaged and interesting, they definitely have to work on how they express affections, and if how the other person's accepting that or open to that. So they definitely have to, because their Venuses are squared. I mean, hers is in Virgo and his is in Sagittarius. So whereas she may be a little bit more serious and very more private and serious, and it's just them two, he has this more like, well, let's go take a trip and let's go, let's include a larger view here, and maybe taking a trip for a fun thing where she may want to stay home, and so the affections has to be worked on between the two of them.
Reinforced also by the fact that his Saturn is on her ascendant. That could definitely be, now that could go two ways. There's learning discipline from your partner, maybe seeing ways to do things that bring things to fruition, as far as manifestation, but it can also be somebody that kind of sits on your vibe sometimes, especially your natural self. So, I mean, it's a two-sided coin. And I do think I agree with Justin there that there are some things in this chart that would say, we got to find a way to make this work. And I think that due to just look at all that Virgo, I mean, I think this is a challenge they can handle. I mean, I don't think that organization and communication in the relationship is going to be an issue. I feel like they're probably brutally, sarcastically honest with them. While that being said, though, I do feel like their communication styles are very different, and that is going to kind of be the crux in the issue. I think that they're committed to working on the problems, but as from a communication, basically a Mercury and a Venus standpoint, there's things that need to kind of be addressed over time. What I saw you shaking your head, Justin. What do you think about
Well,
that?
well, his Venus squares her Mercury.
Mhm.
So there can be a disconnect between affections and communications, but they, in some ways, sometimes Libra is an air sign, and it can be very much like that Virgo. They're both of them are smart, and his moon does sextile her Mercury, so there is some hope there. But I think because his Venus squares her Juno, what she's looking for in relationship, and then squares her Mercury, how she thinks or communicates, he definitely has to work more on his affections, and how that it's actually, I think, more on him, that he's got to work on how he expresses affection, that she's receptive to that, and sensitive to what she needs, Juno, what she needs in the relationship. But I agree with you. I think they can work through it. Definitely, I agree with you.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
their Saturns are trying each other, so I think that their Saturns are going to work. So if it is some kind of structure or restriction that she could feel from him, I think she's going to do okay because her Saturn is trying her ascendant already. So I think she'll deal with that quite well.
looking
So,
at the go ahead.
I'm curious because we've been kind of dancing around the elephant in the room, and I'm curious what you two think, or you three of you think, of the Uranus-Pluto conjunction. That his Uranus is on her Pluto. That's quite powerful.
I'm more concerned with the moon there. I'm far more concerned with the moon there. Yes, the Uranus-Pluto thing, okay, that's intense, but it's far more personal with the moon involved there. And when we're looking at Pluto moon interactions in synastry, there can be deep passion. There can be, this operatic intensity, but at the same time, the moon's in detriment in Scorpio. The moon is, trying to sort of navigate the day to day, but there's these potential roller coaster kind of feelings that can be there. And then that Uranus there just exacerbates that. Now, he's natally got a moon Uranus signature, right? So he's used to having to deal with some emotional ups and downs. But then when you put Pluto in the mix, it just intensifies it.
But I'd say since he has he's born with a new moon, that he probably can deal with it pretty good because he can work and find a new solution. He's used to trying new things.
I know that Robert, you're very aware of their history. About 2 years ago, the South Node went over that, and I'd be curious if they moved or what was kind of big in their life about 2 years ago when that South Node went in Scorpio went over that.
Well, there is something that happened there, and it was they became the chair people for the Met Gala. And I think it's interesting how that fits into what we're talking about because, Uranus likes to be in Scorpio, and it's very much associated with hidden information, like I would say like occult style information, and somebody that has Scorpio is already a watcher. So now you have somebody that is watching, that is able to kind of connect to the undercurrent egregores that are happening in situations and tie that into the moon, okay, which is their internal balance. So I think there's a lot of undercurrent of that, and the intensity that she brings to that table with that Scorpio Pluto on top of that, it's like he's hidden and she's intense about it. So that's almost like a switching of the roles in their life, where he is kind of the one laying back and she is the one being intense about getting to the very root cause of things. And let's talk about the Met Gala. The Met Gala is essentially, for the highest level of social standards, it's kind of like almost like a key party. The Met Gala is like, if you're a who's who and you want to be a who's who's who. You better show up to the Met Gala, and you better be wearing something weird. So I mean, that's just the truth of it. So while I could see in the relationship that causing issues, especially being as close it is to the line between the third and the fourth house, I think publicly and communication wise, it's a benefit, whereas in the more intimate moments in their relationship, it could be a detriment.
And note also Mars, that domiciled Mars. It's it's crossed over the line into Blake's fourth house, right? But it's it's very tightly, it's just 2 degrees from that Uranus. So that's not just the Uranian volatility, that's the fighting spirit of that Mars, and also a certain amount of ruthlessness, a certain amount of calculating drive that we can see with that Mars. And then you combine Mars Pluto. Mars Pluto is one of those quote unquote red flags in Synastry. Now that doesn't mean that it can't ever work out. Sometimes it makes for an operatic kind of relationship. It makes for something that's very passionate, very intense, amazing in bed, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But
we're beating around the bush here. They probably have really good sex. I mean, like,
well, they've got 4 kids.
We're all adults here. I mean, like, Mars and Scorpio, especially with the Uranus there, like, you never know what you're going to get when you walk into that bedroom,
Right. Electric, literally electric, right? Yeah. But also, then also with control issues that can show up anytime we're dealing with Pluto. And interactions with Pluto. There's another connection that I would like to point out here, partly because of, talking about things that in Synastry can be either, can sometimes be very good, but can also go very, very bad. We have here a very tight conjunction between her Jupiter and his Chiron, both at that anaretic 29th degree. Now, when we see a Jupiter Chiron hard aspect, I mean, any contact between them in Synastry, but especially with the hard aspect, there can be this sudden pulling together, like, this person came into my life, swept me off my feet. And in particular, a sense of a deep spiritual connection, that this person is understanding of my deepest wounds. Okay. And that's a really powerful draw. And at the same time, when we see these in hard aspect together, there can sometimes be every bit as suddenly a severing. And so, it's interesting to see, are there enough strong connections between these two that they can get over that kind of a sudden, like, suddenly I'm not into you anymore, right? Do they have enough glue? The Saturn trine Saturn combination, that's some nice glue, especially with the rulers of the descendants, the traditional ruler and the transcendental ruler being together. That makes for some nice glue. But it's going to be interesting to see if this relationship does stand the test of time because of that Jupiter Chiron combination there.
I think another way to look at that too, though, is I feel like she, I view Jupiter in relationships as, where you can give your partner a sense of meaning. And I do feel like she can, her ability to kind of be that Aries Jupiter and kind of just, she's not going to handle him delicately. She's,
Right.
You know, like when if he's in a place where he's really feeling that Chiron in Aries, I think that she will quickly come in there and be like his biggest hype man, you know, especially on that higher level of the ninth house.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do think the ninth house placement for this
Yeah.
helps it out.
Mhm.
Well, and I, Aries is a sign of empowerment.
Mhm.
And so, and Jupiter tends to inflate, expand here. And so in one respect, she could be his muse in a way. As far as, and I might also say she does have the muse aspect because her lot of spirit, which we don't see on here, is in Leo. So she could be empower him to really be more self-confident and less worried about how people value him. I will say one other thing, because they both have Jupiter retrograding. This is a late bloomer, so they're going to be a couple that has greater success after the age of 40 and 50. They come under their own. It's delayed fortune, or a late bloomer. And so when their peers are kind of retiring and they're still going to be a power couple. They're still going to be out there doing things because they've got something to accomplish later in life with the Jupiter retrograde, I think there. But I think she could empower him, but also he can understand as a Chiron when she may delay how she asserts herself. He can actually understand that with the Jupiter retrograding in Aries.
And their Chirons are sextile to each other, and then their Jupiters are semi-sextile to each other. So they have nice connections with all of that, except his Jupiter is conjunct her Pholus.
Right. Well, that would actually also bring out her hidden talents, her abilities that she previously has not seen or noticed or felt confident about. And what I think is interesting about that is that actually backs up another thing that we don't see here in the chart because we don't have a marking for it. But if I remember correctly, her Lilith is at 26 Cancer.
Yes.
And that is conjoining his Vesta. And one of the things I mentioned earlier that I like to look for Vesta connections in Synastry, because Vesta can be, what do we hold sacred? And when it touches something else, something in a partner's chart, then it's like, what are we elevating about that? What are we seeing sacred in them? And I really like it that it is conjoining her Lilith, because that Lilith that I was talking about before, being in the 12th house, and this kind of, that the need to hide her wildness, the need to hide her authenticity that might rub other people the wrong way, is in fact what he's elevating, what he's holding sacred.
Well, just to piggyback off what you're saying there, Simon, and this is something you're very aware of, Robert, is that that Pholus is, if it's in the 10th house of career, that means sudden changes in career, and she's got it in Taurus, and she's going through this this court thing. Right. And so I think this thing with this prior director of this film is kind of representative of that sudden events happening in one's career. But we just saw where this director, Gamboni or whatever his name is, pulled Ryan into it. And I think this is where we see this affecting his Jupiter. And so there could be, because it is in Taurus, could have some ramifications about money or resources here, that his Jupiter gets pulled into her career house with events with that. And I think that, to your point about the Cancer, and the event you were talking about, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is like somebody with Chiron in the ninth house is not going to like legal battles. I mean,
Nope.
like that is just, that's textbook astrology right there. I mean, ninth house, is the legal system as well. A wound there, especially in Aries, where you feel like you're fighting for your sovereignty. I mean, that could be an issue. I think, one of the main the main themes we've been talking about is like, what is the balance of power in this relationship? He is by far a more successful actor. I would say fiscally, at least. All right. She's been in a lot as well. I'm not taking anything away from her. But I mean, and when you look at their astro location charts, it gets even more interesting because they're in New York. Okay. And, uh, she has her Uranus line running right through New York City. And he has the midpoint of his sun and his moon running right through New York City. So he's having a much better time in their current living arrangement as well. And when you look at the Synastry chart, what's happening in his fifth house? Nothing. What's happening in her fifth house? A lot of outer planet activity. I would definitely see a situation where she's feeling almost a traditional pressure, especially with all of that Virgo energy, to be kind of the person who's tending to the children. And now obviously they're rich enough where they've got a support system. Okay, she's not scrubbing the pajamas in the kitchen, I'm sure, but just from a raising the children, especially because she has the Neptune in Capricorn, which is very much about giving that enchanted structure. It's a good placement to raise children. Saturn in in Sagittarius, it could be a wild placement, but it's also a good sign to kind of teach freedom within constraints. So she has a very good child rearing fifth house. And is that part of the equation? Uranus on top of your Uranus line on where you live can certainly equate to legal problems. That is a shock. This is a shock to the system, for them right now. And that is really how it's being perceived, is like they were not expecting this to A, get to the level that it was, and B, for it to be drawn out as far as it has been. He's a Scorpio. All right. He's a super Scorpio. He does not want his personal life being aired out in the public. All right. Especially over a legal battle with your Chiron in the ninth house. I think he would actually be more concerned about this situation than she would.
Yeah, and I
Also,
want to just point out really quickly that Pluto on the cusp of her fourth house, when you're talking about mother and where they live, this is a couple. I'm surprised if they didn't move 2 or 3 years ago, within the last 2 or 3 years, even make changes to their living space. And I think that means that I don't think they're going to stay in New York forever. Not with that Pluto on the cusp of her fourth house and Uranus on that Pluto,
Yeah.
I feel like that actually goes with what's burning up my brain at the moment, which is the fact that they're about to experience Uranus conjoining that Jupiter Pholus combination. That's coming up this summer, so that's big change automatically when Uranus hits something sensitive. And we were just talking about him getting pulled into changes with her career, but also Jupiter relates to legal matters.
Yeah.
She just moved into a progressed moon in Aquarius, first degree.
Is that Uranus is that Uranus going to shadow over that degree? I would imagine it would.
Pluto just went over that. Her moon's at 1 degree. I'm sorry, her progressed moon's 1 degree Aquarius.
Yeah, I'm talking about the Jupiter Pholus. Is I would imagine that Uranus is going to, move.
Yes.
And here's the thing: that trial is really not set until 2026.
Yeah.
So this is going to move forward, and then retrograde right back over.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
This is not going to be. And listen, that's the last thing you want is Uranus with staying power. I mean, that is a contradiction that I don't need in my life.
Right. Uranus on that Jupiter in Pholus. That we're going to see some big stuff still happen.
I mean, Taurus. It's just like. No thanks. Resources in the 10th house, they don't like that. He don't like that. Taurus is not a comfortable energy for him.
Yeah.
With all of that Scorpio down there. I mean, there's a lot of integration that has to happen, and that could give you a lot of an idea of the motivation behind him starting all these businesses. Is that kind of like constant fear of not being rich and famous anymore?
Right. Well, I might say, talking about, and I love, Simon, how you brought it. Both of you are bringing in this where their transits are. Her progress moon's at 1 degree Aquarius, so she's kind of moving into a breakout period, and his progress moon is 8 degrees Leo right now, so he's in a creative period.
Yeah, but that progressed moon then is squaring off against his natal Mars and her midheaven.
Yeah. Power dynamics and definitely issues of, how visibility is affecting that right now. He does not want people to see his true colors, and she is being very cut and dry. I'm sure that there are a lot of conflicts going on, especially with that Mercury and Venus square between them. How we think versus our vibe. I mean, that is probably that's the nature of Hollywood in so many ways. I mean, like, listen, you got 4 astrologers here talking about you on the internet. I mean,
Right.
Ryan Reynolds hates that. All right, so I mean,
right.
like, that's something to consider.
Okay, now we're going to look at the composite chart.
I love this composite chart.
We'll start. We'll let you
So maybe
start.
we should explain, if anybody doesn't know, what the composite chart kind of represents.
Go ahead.
Well, I see the composite chart is really what the person, the two souls are learning together in this lifetime. If you really put it together, what their spiritual lesson is together. That's the way I look at the composite chart. What do you all think?
Yeah, it's very similar approach, but I also view that it, whereas the synastry is the relationship between the two people, the composite chart is the relationship itself.
Yeah, I see it as the chart of the relationship as an entity unto itself, because a relationship can take on a life of its own. You mentioned earlier the notion of a power couple. When you've got a power couple, that relationship is its own entity. Okay, it's doing its own stuff, and sometimes its own stuff is going to get along with the individuals involved, and sometimes its own stuff is going to be challenging to the individuals involved.
I agree with both of you. I just add the spiritual component into it there.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
That's soul level.
And a composite chart is combining the 2 suns and coming up with a degree, the 2 moons and coming up with a degree. So you take the planets and you find the midpoint between them, and then it creates a new chart.
Yeah, and looking at this chart right here, I mean, you're looking at the nature of a stellium in Virgo and a stellium of Scorpio being combined into a midpoint in Libra. It's a beautiful relationship. I mean, in some ways, this is almost proof that is a very powerful sextile when it comes to relationships, because, I mean, look at all that it brings together. I mean, Libra is in its house where it likes to be. Okay. The ruler of Libra is Venus. This is a Venus-centric house. I mean, and look at all of the action we've got going on here. I mean, good communicators, maybe a little, what would be a good word for the Virgo and Mercury here? Maybe a little tedious at times, but overall though, I mean, I think, especially with a sun and a moon and a Mars in a relationship chart in Libra, in a composite, it's like we were talking about staying power and the glue that holds it together. I mean, I think this is a good secondary example of how that could happen.
Right. And look at the Psyche and Eros. Mm-hmm. We know in Greek mythology, they were a couple, and we see the Psyche and Eros within a degree here of each other, and it's in that first house. So I think this is a relationship that's meant to be.
Yeah.
And that Psyche and Eros are trine Jupiter, who rules the descendant of the composite chart. That Jupiter is now more tightly received. It's in a quincunx with the Saturn and Venus pairing, that are together. But even though it's a quincunx, it's still that's a little bit more tight than we saw it before. Venus is domiciled. So not only is she in a house she likes to be in, she's in her own sign. So she's ruling that Jupiter. So we're seeing these nice interactions here with that, with the ruler of the descendant. I like seeing that.
And here the Jupiter and Chiron are in that 9th house. So exactly what you were talking about, that they don't like having to go to court.
Oh, no,
yeah, it's interesting. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, note that here that Chiron is tightly trine that domiciled Mercury. So that to me actually gives some hope. Kind of the ability to, like, okay, dot our I's and cross our T's is going to help us through the difficulties of this court experience.
And you can see how much they want to be viewed as kind of, maybe a little bit royal, very caretaking in the community with that what's going on with that 11th house, the South Node, and that Vesta. You know what I mean? Like, they have a natural ability to kind of be that caretaker and have a plan to do that. So things like being a chairperson for these events, being somebody who is viewed as one of the tribal leaders of the community is there. But at the other hand, you have that anti-Versus and that Nessus, in Leo there. So there is a little bit of that kind of like, I'll do this, but I want this for myself. And that's not always a good vibe to bring into a community. So I could see that their relationship, while it's very solid, within itself, could actually be something. Now, we don't know this, but in the actual greater community, and we're seeing that with the court case a little bit, is there might be some people who resent them a little bit.
Yeah.
Also note that, that Venus being conjoining Saturn, now that's relationship glue, but it can also make things it may be a little too blunt at times, especially when it is squaring the nodes. And that Saturn rules that north node. And so to have the ruler of the north node kind of at odds with the nodes, there can feel like anytime you've got a planet at the bendings of the nodes, that planet's concerns can feel like they're pulling you off track. And yet, since it's Saturn who rules that north node, it's like you feel pulled off track by the very thing that you need to tend to in order to be on track.
Yeah.
And, I do like seeing that north node in the 5th house. That's like, the purpose of the relationship, the karmic arc of the relationship is pleasure, lovers, children, doing the stuff that they're doing. But it is malefic ruled. It is very serious. And at the same time, it's how do we make those things last? How do we make the love relationship something that is permanent, something that does withstand the test of time? That is literally the purpose for this relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to that quincunx I brought up, because Jupiter is quincunx Saturn. And so there's like this seesaw kind of thing going on, that Jupiter that rules the descendant is in a relationship and yet at odds with the ruler of the north node in this chart.
Yeah. And, that's going to be very much fed by what's going on at the top of the chart at the MC. You're talking about Chiron conjunct the MC, especially in Taurus. I mean, you're very much worried about resources and very much worried about making sure that the train keeps going, and you talked about the North Node in Capricorn in the fifth house. That's very much a family building, legacy building position. Like
Yeah.
Capricorn likes to build structures. They're not just building their family to have children, they're trying to build generational wealth.
Yes.
Right. And I would say from a more to the spiritual, that Hygeia is still in that 12th house of the subconscious in Leo. So there is a wound there with self-expression and working through ego and authenticity and creative self-expression. And to your point about that Chiron, it's opposite Uranus, and those are on the angle. And I think that's a little bit more harsher because it is in Scorpio and Taurus on an angle, fixed sign. They're going to have to learn to go through some transformations. They're going to lose some stuff with Uranus down there in Scorpio on the IC, and with Chiron on the midheaven. And so they're really learning about values. And you mentioned back to what you're saying about all of that stuff in the second house. I think they're learning about the values of relationship and healthy power in relationship and self-expression. And they're going to have to learn to let some things go with Chiron on that midheaven, with Uranus on the IC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So any more comments?
I think they're going to stick together. I think they've got a plan. And I think that it's going to be a rough road. I think there's probably some imbalance in the relationship, and that will get worked out. But again, when you see that all of that Libra, between in the composite, and then all of those, those powerful things, and then you're talking about like the ascendant sun relationship. I mean, there's just a lot of things there that can really bring them together and make them feel like a team, especially what we were talking about with like him really needing a partner to do all of these things. I think she is the right partner for him, and I think that he knows that. Listen, it's Ryan Reynolds. He can get anybody he wants. All right, like it's Blake Lively is one of the most stunning people on the planet. They're not together because they feel like they have to be. They're together because they're feeling like they complete each other, and I think that composite North Node in that Capricorn is very telling. They are looking to build a structural legacy for themselves. You don't have 4 kids by accident, and I think that that's the goal. Resources, lawsuits, things like that are very scary for them. Being too much for astrologers talking about them on the internet, probably not a big fan of that either, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, and I think that kind of back to when we look at his chart, which is in the Vedic, is looking towards stability. I think that shows up with the Chiron, and Taurus, and that Uranus and Scorpio. They definitely have to watch their money and their resources as they go through these trials and tribulations in life.
Oh, they will be. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. That was awesome.
I want to thank our audience for watching live, and I want to thank the Cosmic Connections Astrology Relationship team. And please let us know what you think. Leave a comment and a like, and tell your friends. And we'll see you next time. But we have a little advertisement here. Robert, you can tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, Justin and I on Sunday we're doing the U.S. Global Currents. You can get you can find that on Talk Cosmos. I also do the turning season with Linda Berry. That's a vibrational astrology. We do that right at the equinoxes and the solstices. I also, I come from a neo-pagan background. We have our big Druid event this year, coming up in May. It's called Music of the Spheres. It's all astrology related. You can check that out at magisgathering.org. And then we are starting the only vibrational astrology focused conference. Fractal Cosmos, it's going to be fully online this year. We have, David Cochran will be presenting there. He is the progenitor of the study of vibrational astrology. Linda Berry, who is the leading researcher. It's going to be a great time. We've got some good stuff planned.
Thank you. And Simon?
So I can be found both at my website and also on Patreon. On Patreon, I write about the astrological transits, and I also do custom astrological art for my patrons. And like Liz, like Justin, and I assume like Robert, I am a consulting astrologer. And therefore, if you wish to schedule a consultation with me, you can find me at my website, iconalchemy.com.
Justin?
Yeah, and the best way to get a hold of me is just take a look at my YouTube channel. You can find me on YouTube under Astrological Yogi, because I do a combination of both Western and Jyotish astrology and consulting. So check me out on YouTube, and you can best way to get a hold of me is through my email. Thank you.
And like Simon said, we do consultations and have YouTube channels, etc. We appreciate you subscribing and liking. And other shows, Robert and I are going to do a magical astrology show coming up here in the near future. And we'll be back with Cosmic Connections in a month or so. And Simon is on most of the time on planet stationing, and there's a lot of other shows to choose from to watch. Come back and watch when you have time. And Justin and I will be on Talk Cosmos on April 27th, talking about the Taurus new moon and imagine the future. You can watch it live here on my channel, or come back and watch it at a later time. Again, to get a hold of Simon, her website's iconalchemy.com. My website is alightpath.com. To get a hold of Justin, his email is justin.elzie@gmail.com. And Robert's website is deepearthastrology.com. And again, team, I want to say thank you. I appreciate all your contributions. And we can say goodbye for now, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.